Emma looked forward to summer every year since she was 8 years old. That was when her family would pack up their car and drive 3 hours to her grandparents' farm, where her aunt, uncle, and cousin Jake would also spend 2 weeks. Those 14 days were the highlight of her childhood. Emma and Jake were the same age, both born in April, just 2 weeks apart. Despite living in different states, they'd formed a bond that seemed unbreakable during those summer gatherings. While the adults chatted on the porch drinking lemonade, Emma and Jake would explore the vast farmland with their disposable cameras, a gift from their grandmother who noticed their shared interest in capturing moments. "Look at that bird, Emma." Jake would point at a red-winged blackbird perched on a fence post. Emma would carefully frame the shot, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. "Your turn," she would say, handing the camera to Jake, who would then take a picture of Emma standing in the golden wheat field, her brown hair blowing in the summer breeze. By the time they were 13, they had filled several photo albums. On the last day of their summer visit that year, as the sun set behind the old oak tree, they made a promise to each other. "Even though we live far away, we can still share our lives," Jake said, his voice beginning to deepen with adolescence. He held up his new digital camera, a birthday present from his parents. "I'll send you pictures of California, and you can send me pictures of New York." Emma nodded, her heart feeling strangely heavy at the thought of leaving the next morning. "I promised to send you something every week." They kept that promise for years. Every Sunday, Emma would find a new email from Jake with photos attached. His high school, the beach near his house, his friends, his dog Max. She would send him pictures of the changing seasons in New York, the snow-covered streets in winter, the cherry blossoms in spring, her school projects, and her cat Milo. Through their pictures, they watched each other grow up. Emma noticed how Jake's shoulders broadened, how his smile remained the same, but his face changed from boyish to handsome. She wondered if he noticed how she changed too, from a gangly girl to a young woman. When they were 17, the summer visits became less frequent as college preparations took priority. Their emails slowed down too, but they still made an effort to share important moments. Jake sent pictures from his senior prom, standing beside a pretty blonde girl in a blue dress. Emma felt a strange twinge in her chest when she saw it, a feeling she couldn't quite name. She sent him photos from her photography class exhibition, where her work had won first prize. "You inspired me to take this class," she wrote in her email. Jake replied with a thumbs-up emoji and always knew you had the eye for it. Their last summer together at the farm was when they were 18. Emma brought her professional camera, a graduation gift from her parents, who supported her decision to study photography in college. Jake brought his sketchbooks filled with building designs. He was heading to architecture school in the fall. They spent those 2 weeks capturing the farm in detail, knowing it might be their last chance for a while. They photographed every corner, every sunset, every meal together. Emma noticed how Jake's hand sometimes brushed against hers when they looked at pictures together on her camera screen, and how she didn't mind the warmth of his touch. On their last night, they sat on the porch swing, looking at the stars. "Promise we'll keep sharing pictures?" Emma asked, her voice soft in the night air. Jake's eyes met hers, holding her gaze a moment longer than usual. "Always," he said. "No matter where life takes us." Emma felt something shift between them, something she couldn't capture with her camera. It was in the way Jake looked at her, not as the cousin he'd grown up with, but as someone he was seeing in a new light. As they said goodbye the next morning, Jake hugged her longer than usual. "I'll be looking for your emails," he whispered in her ear. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched his car disappear down the dusty road, already composing in her mind the first picture she would send him from college, and wondering what moments from his new life he would choose to share with her. 5 years passed quickly. Emma's weekly emails to Jake became monthly, then occasional. The photographs they shared changed too. No longer casual snapshots of daily life, they became carefully selected highlights, Emma's photography exhibitions, Jake's architectural projects. The intimate connection they once had seemed to fade with each passing season. Emma sat in her small New York apartment, scrolling through her phone. It was nearly midnight, but sleep wouldn't come. She opened her special folder, the one labeled simply J, and looked at the pictures Jake had sent over the years. His face had matured, becoming more angular, his eyes holding a confidence that came with success. At 23, Jake had already worked on several small building projects in San Francisco. The last photo he sent was 3 months ago, Jake standing in front of a modern glass building, his design brought to life. He wore a suit, looking so different from the boy who used to run with her through cornfields. My first commercial project, he had written. Emma had replied with congratulations, but the conversation ended there. Emma got up and walked to her desk where a framed picture sat, the last one they took together at the farm 5 years ago. She touched the glass gently, remembering how his arm felt around her shoulders, how his laugh seemed to warm her from the inside. She missed that feeling more than she wanted to admit. Her phone pinged with a new email notification. Emma's heart jumped when she saw Jake's name. It had been months since he reached out first. She opened it quickly, almost dropping her phone in her haste. "Hey Em," the message read. "I'll be in New York next month for a conference. Would be nice to see you. It's been too long." Emma read the message several times, her heart beating faster each time. She wanted to reply immediately but stopped herself. Taking a deep breath, she put her phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. She didn't want to seem too eager, though she was. After 15 minutes that felt like hours, she picked up her phone again and typed, "Would love to catch up. Let me know when you're free." She added a smiley face, deleted it, added it again, then finally pressed send before she could overthink it more. His reply came the next morning. They arranged to meet at a cafe near Central Park on the 15th. Emma marked the date on her calendar, circling it twice with red pen. The days crawled by. Emma found herself looking through her closet repeatedly, unsure what to wear. She wanted to look good, but not like she was trying too hard. She settled on a blue dress that matched her eyes and a light jacket, casual but flattering. On the morning of their meeting, Emma woke up early. She took extra time with her hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders the way she wore it during those summer days at the farm. Before leaving her apartment, she grabbed her camera. Some habits never changed. The cafe was busy when she arrived. Emma found a table near the window and ordered a coffee, her eyes constantly darting to the door. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her coffee grew cold as her anxiety grew. Maybe he changed his mind. Then she saw him, taller than she remembered, his shoulders broader. Jake wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his dark hair slightly wind-blown. He hadn't seen her yet. Emma watched him scan the cafe, and the concentrated look on his face brought back a rush of memories. Their eyes met across the room. Jake's serious expression melted into a warm smile that made Emma's stomach flutter. He walked toward her, navigating between tables with grace. "Emma," he said, her name sounding different in his deeper voice. She stood, unsure whether to hug him or shake his hand. Jake made the decision for her, pulling her into a tight embrace. He smelled of cologne and something familiar that reminded her of summers past. "It's so good to see you," he whispered against her hair. When they pulled apart, Emma noticed Jake's eyes lingering on her face a moment longer than necessary. "You look beautiful," he said simply. They sat down, an awkward silence settling between them, strangers who once knew each other better than anyone else. Jake ordered coffee, and as they waited, Emma pulled out her camera. "Some things never change," Jake laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that wasn't captured in any of his photos. Emma smiled and took his picture, capturing this moment of reunion. When she lowered the camera, she found Jake looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I've missed this," he said quietly. "I've missed you." Emma felt the wall she had built around her feelings for Jake begin to crumble. 5 years of distance melted away with those 4 simple words. They spent hours in that cafe, catching up on 5 years of life. Jake told Emma about his work in San Francisco, how he was slowly making a name for himself in architecture. Emma shared stories of her photography jobs, the weddings and events she covered to pay bills while pursuing her artistic projects on the side. "I've seen your work online," Jake admitted, stirring his 3rd cup of coffee. "I follow your professional Instagram. That series you did on abandoned buildings was incredible." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "You never commented or liked anything." Jake looked down at his cup. "I didn't want you to think I was keeping tabs on you." "Were you?" Emma asked, her voice softer than she intended. Jake met her eyes. "Yes." That simple answer made Emma's heart race. The afternoon light through the cafe window cast a golden glow on Jake's face, reminding her of those sunset moments at the farm. Without thinking, she raised her camera and took a picture. "What was that for?" Jake asked, not annoyed but curious. "The light was perfect," Emma said. "And you looked?" "I looked what?" "Like someone I've known my whole life, but I'm just meeting for the first time." Jake reached across the table and took her hand. His touch sent warmth up her arm. "I know exactly what you mean." Later, they walked through Central Park as the day cooled into evening. Jake had extended his stay in New York by 2 days. "The conference isn't that important," he said when Emma expressed surprise. What remained unspoken but understood was that seeing her was more important. They stopped on a bridge overlooking the lake. Couples in rowboats drifted below them, and the city skyline created a perfect backdrop. Jake stood close to Emma, their shoulders touching. "Remember when we used to take pictures of everything at the farm?" Jake asked. "I still have all those old albums at my apartment." "You kept them?" Emma was surprised. She had assumed she was the only one who held onto those memories so tightly. "Of course I did. They're some of my favorite memories." Jake turned to face her. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you." Emma's heart skipped. The serious tone in his voice made her nervous. "What is it?" "I've been offered a job here in New York. A big project. Redesigning part of an old hotel into modern apartments. I'd be here for at least a year." Emma's breath caught. "You're moving to New York?" Jake nodded. "I haven't given them my answer yet. I wanted to see you first." "See me? Why?" Emma asked, though part of her already knew the answer, already hoped for it. Jake took a deep breath. "Because you're part of my decision. Emma, over these years, even when we barely talked, I would look at our old pictures and feel connected to you in a way I can't explain." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. All those nights she spent looking at his photos, wondering if he ever thought of her the same way. Now she had her answer. "I've always felt guilty about it," Jake continued, his voice low. "You're my cousin. I'm not supposed to feel this way." Emma looked up at him, really looked at him. Not as the boy from her childhood summers, but as the man standing before her now. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. "I know," she whispered. "I felt the same way. And the same guilt." Jake stepped closer, one hand gently touching her cheek. "What do we do about it?" The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Emma raised her camera one more time, capturing Jake's face in this moment of vulnerability and hope. When she lowered it, she made a decision. "My apartment is 10 minutes from here," she said. "We could talk more there." Jake nodded, understanding the invitation for what it was, not just to her home, but to explore whatever this feeling was between them. He took her hand as they walked toward the park exit, their fingers intertwining naturally. Emma's mind raced ahead to her apartment. Was it clean enough? Would he notice the framed photo of them she kept by her bed? Would he understand what it meant that she had kept him so close all these years? As they walked in comfortable silence, Emma felt both terrified and more alive than she had in years. Whatever happened next would change everything. The cousin she grew up with was now a man who made her heart race, whose touch left her skin tingling, whose eyes held promises she was finally ready to explore. The elevator ride to her fifth-floor apartment felt eternal. Standing side by side, neither spoke, but Emma could feel the electricity between them. When the doors finally opened, Jake let her lead the way down the hall to her door. With slightly trembling hands, Emma unlocked it and stepped inside. "Welcome to my home," she said softly, suddenly shy as Jake followed her in. Jake stepped into Emma's apartment, looking around with curious eyes. The walls were covered with photographs, her work, and a few older ones she had taken during their summers together. His eyes stopped on a framed picture of them at 16, sitting on the porch swing at the farm. "You kept this," he said, moving closer to examine it. Emma nodded, watching him closely. "It's one of my favorites." Jake turned to her, something unspoken in his eyes. The small apartment suddenly felt even smaller with his presence filling it. Emma moved to the kitchen, needing a moment to collect herself. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Wine?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Wine would be nice," Jake answered, still looking at the photos on her walls. Emma poured 2 glasses of red wine with slightly trembling hands. When she returned to the living room, Jake had taken off his jacket and was sitting on her couch, looking comfortable yet somehow nervous at the same time. She handed him a glass and sat beside him, leaving a small space between them. The silence stretched between them, filled with things neither knew how to say. "Emma," Jake finally spoke, turning to face her. "I need to know if I'm imagining this thing between us." Emma took a sip of wine for courage. "You're not imagining it." Relief washed over his face. He placed his glass on the coffee table and moved closer to her. "What do we do about it? We're cousins." Emma had thought about this more times than she could count. "We grew up together, but we're adults now. We can make our own choices." Jake's hand found hers, his thumb gently stroking her palm. The simple touch sent warmth through her body. "I've thought about you so much over the years. Not just as my cousin, but as Emma. The girl who understood me, who saw the world the way I did." Emma set her wine down too. "I know. I feel the same way." Jake leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Emma didn't move, her heart pounding as his face came closer to hers. When his lips finally touched hers, soft and questioning, she closed her eyes and leaned into the kiss. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but quickly grew deeper as years of hidden feelings surfaced. Jake's hand moved to cup her face, and Emma found herself pressing closer to him, one hand resting on his chest where she could feel his heart racing as fast as her own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Jake rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he whispered. Emma smiled, feeling lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. "Me too." They talked for hours after that, curled together on her couch, the wine forgotten. Jake told her about his feelings that had grown from childhood friendship to something deeper. Emma admitted how she had dated other men, but always compared them to him, how no one else understood her the way he did. As the night grew late, the conversation slowed, replaced by soft kisses and gentle touches. Emma knew they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but it felt right in a way nothing else had. "Stay tonight," she whispered against his lips. Jake pulled back slightly to look in her eyes. "Are you sure?" Emma nodded. She stood and took his hand, leading him to her bedroom. The street lights filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. Jake noticed another framed photo on her nightstand. The last picture they had taken together 5 years ago. "You really did keep me close," he said, touching the frame gently. Emma wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Always." Jake turned in her arms, his eyes dark with emotion. "I'm taking that job in New York," he said. "I want to be where you are." Emma's heart soared at his words. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that hadn't been there when they were teenagers. "What will we tell our families?" "The truth, eventually," Jake said. "But for now, this is just for us." As he lowered his head to kiss her again, Emma knew their relationship would face challenges. But standing there in his arms, it felt like coming home after a long journey. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of happiness for Emma and Jake. He took the job in New York and found an apartment not far from Emma's. Though he had his own place, he spent most nights with her. They fell into a comfortable routine that felt both new and familiar at the same time. On weekends, they explored the city together with their cameras, just like they used to explore the farm as children. Jake saw New York through Emma's eyes, the hidden corners, the best spots to watch the sunset over the skyline, the small cafes where local artists gathered. Emma found herself seeing the city anew as Jake pointed out architectural details she had never noticed before. But as happy as they were, their secret weighed on them. They avoided places where they might run into friends who knew they were cousins. When Jake's phone rang with his mother's name, Emma's aunt, on the screen, they would look at each other with guilt in their eyes. "We can't keep hiding forever," Emma said one evening as they sat on her couch, looking through photos they had taken that day. Jake sighed, putting down his camera. "I know. I've been thinking about it too." Emma leaned against him, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. "What if they don't understand? What if they try to keep us apart?" Jake wrapped his arm tighter around her. "We're adults, Emma. They can't control us." But they can make us feel terrible about this, Emma said softly. My mom calls you her nephew all the time. Your dad always introduces me as his niece. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Maybe we should look into it more. The whole cousin thing. Emma sat up, confused. What do you mean? I don't know much about my birth, Jake said slowly. My parents don't talk about it much. I know I was adopted, but that's all. They always just said they wanted a child and were blessed to get me. Emma's heart began to race. You were adopted? You never told me that. Jake shrugged. It never seemed important. We're family regardless, right? But now? Now it might matter, Emma finished for him. She stood up and began pacing the room. If you were adopted, then maybe we're not blood relatives at all. The possibility hung in the air between them. Emma stopped pacing and looked at Jake, hope and fear mingling in her chest. I need to ask my parents, Jake said. I need to know the truth. Emma nodded. Call them now. Jake pulled out his phone but hesitated. What if finding out doesn't change anything? What if we're still related somehow? Emma sat beside him again, taking his hand. Then we'll figure it out, but we need to know. Jake took a deep breath and dialed his mother's number. He put the phone on speaker so Emma could hear. Jake, how's New York treating you? His mother's cheerful voice filled the room. It's good, Mom, really good. Jake glanced at Emma. I actually have a question for you. It's important. There was a pause. Of course, honey, what is it? It's about my adoption. Jake's voice was steady, but Emma could feel his hand trembling in hers. I need to know more about where I came from, who my birth parents were. The silence on the other end stretched for so long that Emma wondered if the call had dropped. Mom, are you there? Yes, his mother finally answered, her voice quieter now. I'm here. Why are you asking about this now? Jake looked at Emma, love and determination in his eyes. Because it's important to me. I need to know who I am. Another long pause. Your father and I always planned to tell you everything when you were older. I guess that time has come. Emma squeezed Jake's hand encouragingly. You were born in Seattle, his mother began. Your birth mother was very young, just 18. She wasn't related to us at all, Jake. She was the daughter of a colleague of your father's. Emma felt her heart leap with hope. She moved closer to Jake, her shoulder pressing against his. So I'm not actually related to anyone in our family? Jake asked, his voice tight with emotion. Not by blood, no, but family is more than blood, Jake. We've always loved you as our own. Jake looked at Emma, his eyes shining with tears and relief. I know that, Mom, and I love you and Dad too. This doesn't change that. Thank you for telling me. After a few more minutes of conversation, Jake promised to call again soon and hung up. The moment the call ended, he pulled Emma into his arms, burying his face in her hair. We're not related, he whispered. Not by blood. Emma held him tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. I love you, Jake. I've loved you for so long. Jake pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. No more hiding, no more secrets. We can be together, really together. His kiss tasted of salt and joy and promise. For the first time since their relationship began, Emma felt completely free to love him without guilt or fear. The revelation changed everything for Emma and Jake. What had felt forbidden now felt right. They no longer hid their relationship, though they decided to wait before telling the whole family. They wanted time to enjoy their love without explanation or judgment. 1 month into Jake's new job in New York, Emma received an exciting email. A gallery owner had seen her photography series on abandoned buildings and wanted to feature her work in an upcoming exhibition called Forgotten Spaces. It would be her first major show, a dream come true. Jake, she called out, running into the kitchen where he was making breakfast. The Westwood Gallery wants to show my work. Jake turned from the stove, his face lighting up with pride. Emma, that's amazing. He pulled her into a tight hug, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the small kitchen. I always knew you were incredible. Now everyone else will see it too. Emma laughed as he set her down. The exhibition opens in 6 weeks. That gives me time to select my best pieces and maybe shoot a few more. Jake kissed her softly. We should celebrate tonight. Dinner at that Italian place you love. Perfect, Emma agreed, her heart full of happiness. That evening, Jake arrived at Emma's apartment with a bouquet of wildflowers, reminiscent of the ones they used to photograph at the farm. He also carried a small wrapped package. "What's this?" Emma asked as he handed her the gift. "Open it," Jake said, looking both nervous and excited. Emma unwrapped the package to find a beautiful leather-bound album. Opening it, she gasped. Inside were printouts of the digital photos they had sent each other over the years, arranged chronologically, with dates and small notes in Jake's handwriting. "I saved every picture you ever sent me," Jake explained softly. "I thought it was time they were properly displayed." Emma ran her fingers over the pages, tears forming in her eyes. "It's perfect. Our whole story is here." They never made it to the restaurant that night. Instead, they ordered takeout and spent hours looking through the album, remembering moments they had shared across the distance that had separated them for so long. "I want to add to this album," Jake said, holding Emma close on the couch. "Not just with pictures from our past, but with our future too." Emma turned to look at him, her heart racing at the implication of his words. "Our future?" Jake nodded, suddenly looking serious. "Emma, these past few months have been the happiest of my life. Finding you again, discovering that what I felt wasn't wrong. It's like everything finally makes sense." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this is fast, but I've loved you in some way since we were kids. I don't want to waste any more time." Emma's breath caught as Jake slid off the couch and knelt before her. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Emma, will you marry me? Will you let me add wedding photos to our album, and baby photos and anniversary photos, and all the moments that will make up the rest of our lives?" Emma's hands trembled as Jake opened the box to reveal a delicate ring with a small diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires that matched her eyes. She had dreamed of this moment but never believed it could happen. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jake, yes." Jake's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He rose to kiss her, and Emma felt her whole body respond to his touch, to the promise of their future together. Later that night, as they lay tangled in her sheets, Emma traced lazy patterns on Jake's chest. "How will we tell our families? They still think we're cousins." Jake caught her hand and kissed her fingertips. "We'll tell them everything. About my adoption, about us. It might be difficult at first, but they love us. They'll come around." Emma nodded, hoping he was right. "And if they don't?" "Then we'll make our own family," Jake said simply. "You and me, and maybe someday our children. A family built on truth and love." Emma rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. No matter what challenges they faced, she knew they would face them together. From childhood friends to distant relatives to lovers to future spouses, their journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Jake replied, pulling her closer. "Always have, always will." The day of Emma's gallery opening arrived. The Westwood Gallery was packed with art lovers, photographers, and critics. Emma wore a sleek black dress that made her feel both professional and beautiful. Jake stood by her side in a dark suit, his hand often finding the small of her back, a silent reminder of his support. "Nervous?" he asked as they watched people move from one photograph to another, discussing her work in hushed, appreciative tones. Emma nodded. "A little. It's strange seeing everyone look at my pictures. It's like they're looking at pieces of my soul." Jake squeezed her hand. "They love them, and so do I." The gallery owner approached them, a tall woman named Diane with short silver hair and a keen eye for talent. "Emma, your work is receiving wonderful responses. The series on abandoned buildings feels so intimate, like you've captured the ghosts of memories." Emma smiled, feeling a rush of pride. "Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to convey." "And who is this handsome young man?" Diane asked, looking at Jake. Emma took a deep breath. This was the first time they would introduce themselves as a couple to someone who didn't know their history. "This is Jake," Emma said, her voice steady. "My fiancé." The word felt new and wonderful on her tongue. Jake's smile widened as he shook Diane's hand. "I'm also her biggest fan," he added. "I've been following her work since we were kids." As Diane moved on to speak with other guests, Jake led Emma to a quiet corner of the gallery. "There's something I need to show you," he said, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. He guided her to a small side room that Diane had said would be used for a different exhibit. Emma was surprised to see the door now bore a sign, Shared Visions, a complimentary exhibit. "What is this?" Emma asked as Jake opened the door. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs, not Emma's work, but Jake's. Images he had taken over the years, many of them showing the same locations as Emma's photos, but from different angles, different perspectives. And interspersed among them were the pictures they had sent each other over the years. "Jake," Emma breathed, walking slowly around the room. "You did this? When did you even arrange it?" "I've been working with Diane for weeks," Jake admitted. "I wanted to surprise you." In the center of the room stood a pedestal with their leather-bound album, open for visitors to flip through. Beside it was a book where gallery visitors could write messages for them. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," Emma said, tears forming in her eyes. Jake took her hands in his. "There's one more surprise." He led her to the far wall where a large photograph hung, one she didn't recognize. It showed their grandparents' farm at sunset, the old porch swing empty but waiting. The caption read, "Where it all began, our first home." Emma looked at Jake, confused. "Our first home?" Jake nodded, his eyes shining with excitement. "I bought it, Emma, the farm. Your grandparents are moving to Florida, and they wanted the property to stay in the family. When I told them about us, about our plans to marry, they offered to sell it to me." Emma couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. "We don't have to live there right away," Jake continued quickly. "Your career is here in the city, and my work too. But it can be our weekend place, our holiday home. And maybe someday, our forever home," Emma finished for him. "Where we can take pictures of our children running through the same fields we did." Jake pulled her close, not caring who saw. "Exactly. Our past and our future, all in one place." As they stood in the quiet room surrounded by their shared visions, Emma felt her life come full circle. From innocent children sharing summer days to adults sharing their hearts, their journey had been unexpected but perfect. Later that night, as the last guests left the gallery, Emma and Jake stood in the empty space, taking it all in. "I can't believe we're really here," Emma said softly. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover it was all a dream." Jake pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened. "Not a dream," he murmured against her mouth. "Just the beginning of our story." Emma smiled up at him. "A story worth capturing." Jake nodded, his eyes filled with love. "And we'll capture every moment together, just like we always have." Hand in hand, they walked out of the gallery into the cool night air, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives, no longer as cousins sharing pictures, but as partners sharing everything.